So I'd like to introduce our speaker today, which is Dr. Scott Unger, who is an energy and water conservation coordinator with the city of Mesa. And so he's going to be speaking to us today about NREL's System Advisor Model, or SAM, and how the city of Mesa has currently used it as one of their resources as far as decision making for renewable energy systems, and how they've used the software in a recent project that had to do with hypothetical PV array at Brown Road Water Treatment Plant. And so Scott, many of you know Scott just from our work group activities, but he does have a PhD in civil, environmental, and sustainable engineering from ASU. So go Sun Devils, that's great. And he's got more than 10 years of experience in life cycle assessment and development of sustainability metrics. So he's done a lot of really amazing work with the city of Mesa. He's quantified municipal operations, greenhouse gas emissions inventories, as well as implemented measures for energy and water reduction and efficiency. He's quite a prolific author of various types of peer-reviewed publications. And actually, Scott, I think I will hand it over to you so you can kind of explain maybe a little bit more about your work before you go into your presentation. And do I need to share screen with you?
Yeah, I'll share my screen because I think I'll just run through the model and I'll share it in just a moment. But yeah, you know, in terms of other work that I've done, it's a lot of work with respect to life cycle assessments. A lot of the peer-reviewed publications that I've published are with respect to life cycle assessment or sustainability in healthcare. I've also published work with respect to biofuels in the environment and what are the water quality related impacts with respect to increased biofuel production in the United States. And then also just in terms of consulting work, just a lot of LCA development, LCA modeling, quantification for the best thing about LCA is a myriad of different products. So, you know, anything from kitty litter to water filters to bleach to vitamin supplements. So, you know, understanding what are the cradle to grave life cycle impacts of those different products or services. But I digress a little bit because the purpose of, you know, this presentation is to cover the System Advisor Model, which is a free, yes, I say free platform provided by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, or NREL. So we came across this software because we were looking to understand what would be the economic and, well, really primarily the economic related impacts to deploying different levels of PV arrays in the City of Mesa grid or an SRP's grid, or perhaps even outside of those, you know, in terms of utility scale grids that would, you know, feed into SRP or City of Mesa. But we were having a really tough time understanding how to size and implement or, you know, understand different, you know, features of PV arrays, you know, how we would implement them based on what would be the usage at a given site. So for example, we are starting to increasingly realize that in terms of achieving our renewable energy goals that are stated in our climate action plan, we need to install a lot of renewable energy. And frankly, there's just not enough rooftop space on city sites that even if we put in, you know, PV on every single square foot of rooftop that, you know, we have, or even, you know, parking structures, it simply wouldn't be enough to achieve our renewable energy goals. So for that matter, what we're starting to realize is that we're looking at areas or locations or sites that have open areas where we could install them ground mounted, which would obviously be a lot cheaper than installing at carports or, you know, roof mounted or something like that. But we're looking at, you know, what would be the ROIs associated with deploying these PV arrays in, you know, sites that are owned by the city, but there's a lot of open space so that we could install ground mounted. And what we realized is that Brown Road Water Treatment Plant fit the bill rather perfectly because one, it uses it has a lot of open area. It's just lots of open parts of desert where we could install several acres worth of PV arrays. But further, it's a high usage site. So given that we don't necessarily have net metering available right now, we need to ensure that whatever array that we install won't be producing more than what the site is using at a given time, because it just wouldn't be financially beneficial to the city, because essentially we'd be losing money on the production, the overproduction from the site that isn't using that solar energy. So that's where we ran into a bit of a problem, because it's not just a matter of saying, okay, what is the monthly KW, and make sure that we size the system under that monthly KW, or what would be the lowest monthly KW. It really comes down to time of use scheduling and saying, okay, what is the system producing on a 15-minute or an hour interval basis? And what is the site using on that kind of basis as well, so that you could properly size the system and ensure that you're limiting the time periods at which your system is overproducing or producing more than what the site is using. I attempted to do this manually, just via some Excel workbooks, and I found that it was so difficult to do that. It wasn't possible, or at least not easily so. But I came across, and this is where the big introduction system advisor model, which really is a robust platform for entering all different facets of not just a PV array, but different types of renewable energy systems, to understand what would be their production impacts and what would be their economic impacts. So that's what I'm about to go through right now. Essentially what is, and again, this is a hypothetical model. We have no impending plan or pending plans to actually install this array. This is used as, I guess, supplemental information to understand what would be the impacts if we did in fact install this array. And if it is something that's viable, and if it is viable, we now have this information in hand to really help to inform, again, what would be all of the economic and energy production related impacts with installing a particular array at Brown Road Water Treatment Plant. Again, a hypothetical one. We have no plans to do this at this current point in time. So with that said, I'll share my screen. And can you see my screen? All right, great. So what I have right here is the actual model that we created for Brown Road Water Treatment Plant, or you can see the W right there, and it says WTP underneath my Zoom thing. But so to get to this point right here, we just basically did new project. And what I'm going to do is you can do it like this too. So if we did file new project, I selected photovoltaic, detailed PV model, distributed commercial owner. So this would be not a power purchase agreement, which you could select right here, which would enable you to select what would be the buyback rate, as well as any escalators that would be annual escalators that would be associated with that buyback. But for this model, we assumed that we would own the array outright, and we would just be commercial owners of a distributed array. But as you can see right here, there is all kinds of different renewable energy systems that you can model in this software. And if they're as robust, and I haven't had a chance to explore them just yet, but if they're as robust as what I've worked with the photovoltaic models, these should all be very, very useful in terms of informing what would be impacts associated with deploying these different renewable energy systems. So I think that's something worth exploring for the team. And if anybody gets some good results, or has just overall good modeling with those, I would love to hear more about it. But so we went with a commercial owner of this system right here, what would be a distributed detailed PV model. And so that brings you to this screen right here. And it's very user friendly in a sense. I've worked with several different softwares provided by the EPA or the National Energy Laboratories. And like, for example, Moves. I don't know if anybody's worked with Moves 3.0 as of recently, but it is a cumbersome, not user-friendly software. There's another software that you have to download to, make the software work. It works with SQL data, which is a whole, different level of data analysis, that you have to have a strong background in data analysis to be able to work with the data. But the good thing about this platform is it really lays everything out very cleanly, exactly what the parameters of the system would be. And these tabs would change based on, a different renewable energy system or a different PV system that you would select. So if you selected a power purchase plan, there would be another tab here for inputting what would be the buyback rate, and again, any annual escalators associated with that buyback. But I'll essentially just go through this list right now, and I'll demonstrate exactly what the capabilities and the parameters of the platform are. So it allows you to select a specific location, which in this case, we selected Mesa, Arizona. And I think it has thousands of different locations that you can select from. So it might even have, specific cities, on this call, like, Avondale or Chandler or Glendale or any of those. I'm not certain of that, but at the very least, we do have the Phoenix and the Mesa ones in there. And this is great because it really models what the, radiative forcing would be in our geography, and understanding what would be the weather components of what our geography is too, and how that impacts production. So it's not just, what is the angle of the sun, that is hitting the arrays, but understanding how in high temperature seasons, like for example, in July, where that would be the highest production in certain other geographies, it's actually not the highest production for us because systems overheat and they do not like to produce power in 115-degree weather, which a lot of times it's greater than that on the roofs because the roofs would be potentially even more than that. So the systems tend to like to operate around 75 to 80 degrees, and that weather is achieved in April and May. So that being said, though, it accounts for what would be the temperature characteristics of a geography, as well as any sun-related characteristics of that geography as well. And then we can go select a module, and it has thousands of different modules that you can select from. I'm not going to pretend like I have a great knowledge of this equipment in general. So we selected what was the default option for a single module, and you can see it provides all kinds of different parameters for that module. These ones, if they're in blue, that means you cannot adjust them, and then the other ones, which I don't think there's any adjustable variables in here, but you can see as you select a different module, the values down below will change accordingly. And similar with the inverter right here, you have a selection of thousands of different inverters based on different specifications. We again went with just the generic selection. The system design, this is where you can specify number of inverters and modules within subarrays. We didn't necessarily get into actually configuring the systems ourselves, because what you're able to do is check this box right here, which that enables you to select what would be the size of your system. So for example, we wanted to know just yesterday, and if we look at this right here, going down below, we can see that a 450 or a 500 kW system is going to take up roughly 2.2 acres of space. And so I was posed with the question yesterday, how much space, or in terms of if we had 200 acres, what would be the size of the array that would take up that 200 acres? So this is where I just had a trial and error of scaling all the way up, trying different numbers. And I arrived at the number 45,000 kW, which is 194.9 acres. So this is a great software in terms of, if you want to know what would be the actual size of the array, not in terms of energy production, but in terms of its actual physical size, this software allows you to do that as well. And it also adjusts all of these parameters accordingly if you're not necessarily an expert in solar arrays and solar configurations. So you can just select the size of the array and move on from there. And I believe for this one, we selected a for Brown Road Water Treatment Plant, we went with 850 kW, which would take up 3.7 acres. Then you're able to also put in shade, which seems to be a very advanced element of the platform itself, where, you know, if you have trees or any shade covering the platform, you can account for that. So they have this 3D shade calculator where literally, I think, like at this point, you can draw images over the array and it will say, okay, that will decrease production by, you know, this much, or, you know, all the related production impacts of that shade. We didn't put any of that in there because these will be open fields and we wouldn't anticipate any shade there. This is the losses tab, which again, we use default values, any grid limits associated with the utility that you're plugging into. And then coming up on this one, this is the lifetime and degradation of the system itself, which it's commonly assumed that you lose about 0.5% of its production capacity on an annual basis, which is what we inputted right here. Also allows you to account for system costs. But if you're not, you know, if you don't necessarily have good estimates for these costs, which you can input yourself manually, the platform does calculate these automatically. So installing a 850 kW system that would take up 3.7 acres would be a total installation cost of about $1.5 million. And you can see it accounts for all kinds of different things, including permitting, engineering, the actual equipment, installation. It also has financial parameters. So in terms of, you know, what would be all these different tax rates, or what would be the analysis period, depreciation. I took business classes a long time ago back at ASU. So I did not touch these values at all. Again, we went with defaults. Any federal or state incentives, which were not included here. This is what I found to be the most, or one of the most impressive components of the platform, is that you can, instead of, and I at first thought I had to manually input the electricity rates associated with SRP's E61 plan. So I thought I was going to have to comb through it and say, okay, what is, you know, the time, what is going to be the cost at, you know, this time of day if it's a Monday during this season, if it's a different season during this different, you know, billing period, you know what I mean? There's dozens of different parameters that would be associated with an E61, you know, large industrial sized time of use plan. So what you can do, and I started inputting that until I saw this little option right here, where you can actually select, this would be, I selected what is our zip code, and it displays both SRP and City of Mesa. And you can actually go into Salt River Project's E61 plan, and it will download and apply that rate accordingly. So you can see that if I go down below right here, it has a whole time of use plan that I had just described that I thought I was going to have to input manually, as well as what are the base rates associated, you know, with all of those. So this is that, you know, that saved me probably several days worth of work right there, just having that option right there. And I was even more impressed when we designed further hypothetical arrays, where it also has City of Mesa's rates that you saw, but it also has our interdepartmental rates as well, which I don't even know how they got that, for that matter. Those are City of Mesa interdepartmental rates, but they had them. So I was able to design a system within City of Mesa's grid based on our, you know, it's probably not a secret, our, you know, cheaper electricity rates being interdepartmental customers. So we were able to input that as well. And lastly, you input your electricity load right here, which is done on any sort of basis that you want to do it in terms of different time steps. So you can say you want to do it on a 60-minute, on a 15-minute. Probably don't want to go too much higher than that because you want to make sure that you are as granular as possible. But given that we have Spatial at Brown Road Water Treatment Plant, and you know, anybody who has SRP is familiar with Spatial and its ability to track hourly interval data, but we basically just copy pasted what was the usage data from Spatial, which was a year's worth of hourly interval data, hourly usage data at Brown Road water treatment plant. And that's what you see right here. So that is, I think it was roughly just under 9,000 rows worth of interval data. And it calculates both, the peak KWs as well as what is the monthly energy loads. And then if I want, I can even view the load data. So this is kind of what goes on at Brown Road water treatment plant on an annual basis in terms of what its overall load is. So that covers all of the inputs. And based on those inputs, you would then press simulate, and it takes roughly under a minute to crunch all the numbers. But the numbers have already been crunched, and this is what I obtained. And so let me see if I can minimize this. There we go. So it gives a number of different results, that are incredibly useful to us, and that I was trying to design when I first, started with this analysis when I was just designing my own Excel spreadsheets. But you can see, what would be the monthly energy production of the system, where you can see in May, that's where we're having our highest production because it's not too hot. And what was most relevant to us was what was the simple payback. So financially, when would we break even on this, which would be in 12.3 years. And then a number of different other metrics as well that it's publishing. You can also see different types of energy loss. It gives a heat map for the system power generated at different days of the year and different hours. What is the monthly energy load versus the size of the system itself? What is the cash flow, and what is the annual production of the system? And going through these, I mean, this is, let me see if I can move this actually. There we go. So this is just the summary. I haven't even really had a chance to go through these in their entirety, but you've got, these different data tables where you can, what we were interested in was lifetime hourly data for the system power generated. And you can see that, this is every hour starting from January 1st at, midnight all the way through December 31st, at 11:59, what would be the hourly productions of the system. But I mean, it just has so much different data points that you can choose from. And, again, I haven't, this is where like, I feel like it's probably a good stopping point, because we've been using essentially just these results right here. And I haven't had too much of a chance to actually go into these tabs right here. But yeah, I think at this point, I think it's worth opening up for questions or discussion to, see what everybody thinks and how it might be of value to the other cities. And I think you just got a picture of my son with a popsicle.
That's a good way to end a presentation, I think.
I'd say so. Yeah, he usually has a popsicle.
Great. I'm curious. So, do you know of any other communities in the valley that, or Arizona, that have used SAM?
Not that I know of. I would be surprised if we're the only ones. And I'm pretty certain that, when in the past, when we've gotten reports from consultants in terms of, sizing arrays for previous photovoltaic installations, that they likely used this platform.
Oh, good to know. Any questions for Scott?
Scott, would you mind dropping the link for the NREL tool in the chat when you can have a chance to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll drop it in right now.
I have a question, Harvey Bryan. Is there any carbon results generated by SAM?
Not that I know of. And that's a huge, if it's not in there, that would be a huge limitation associated with the model. What would be the carbon reductions associated with installing that array? But I don't think it is in there.
Good suggestion to NREL to add in.
And if it would be anywhere, it would be somewhere in this tab right here, which I'm kind of just, I would think it would be like in the annual data or in monthly data. what would be, you know, monthly emissions associated with the system. But yeah, I do not think it's in there.
So that would be maybe a shortcoming of the platform. Scott, did you notice anything else that you thought, you know, because it sounds like it's got a lot of benefits, certainly saved you a lot of time, but are there other areas maybe where it wasn't as robust as you thought it should be?
Oh, I think the point about the greenhouse gas emissions or understanding, you know, what its impact on, you know, on the climate, I think that's definitely a huge limitation, and it would be my first thought. I'm trying to think of others though. None are really coming to mind right now. I mean, I haven't had a chance to explore the other renewable energy quantification capabilities of it just yet, and I'd want to know more about that, you know, and what, like, you know, their capabilities are. But at this point, it did exactly what we wanted it to do, which was calculate what would be the economic and energy impacts associated with the system, specifically on an hourly basis, because, you know, that was just understanding those trade-offs, you know, for thousands of hours worth of rows was just something that, you know, we weren't able to do. But I mean, I'm trying to think of other things that it has limitations with, but it's pretty good.
And you said it's a free resource, right?
Yep.
So Scott, this is Chris. If you guys were to, you know, you take the numbers that you put forth in the software, excuse me, are you going to, and say you want to go forward with it at that site, are you going to procure all of the work to be done yourselves, or are you going to hire an ESCO type service to go forward with that?
I think that depends on the scale of the installation. We'd probably want an ESCO to back up the numbers that we calculated. I think this is more of a validation related platform or tool for us, and perhaps to steer our decision making initially, because, you know, to say, you know, what sites would be most preferable or most suitable for a PV installation, and what would be the size of those different arrays, and this helps to inform that decision making. But I still think we would go, I mean, I think it depends on the size of the array. If it was, you know, just like a small carport, probably not. But if it was, you know, a massive array that, you know, we're talking about, you know, a Brown Road water treatment plant, or, you know, somewhere else, then we probably would bring an ESCO on to give a second opinion or, you know, a validation of the numbers that we first quantified.
Salim, you have a question?
I do, yeah. So my question is whether the system can optimally size the PV. Let's say you don't have any restriction on the site. Can you optimally size the system?
That's one thing I wasn't, I guess you guys are better at thinking of limitations than I am, because that's something that I was not able to do. It might be a capability of it, because there's just so many different variables within the software itself, but that would be something to understand. I guess, you know, you'd have to go back and forth with sizing the system on that one tab, and then optimizing what would be the payback period. But at this point, like, I don't think there is like a way to optimize the size of the system based on what is the usage of the site or any interconnection limits associated with the grid that you're installing into.
Thank you so much. And have you played with the battery storage yet?
Not at all. No, I think, like I said, I've only had a chance to work with the, what is it? The PPA and the single commercial owner distributed arrays, but I'm very curious to, you know, try those out and see what its capabilities are, because we're now really starting to discuss battery storage. You know, we're discussing it with more realism than we have in, you know, well, ever for that matter. So having these sorts of tools available to help quantify what its impacts would be, we'll be getting into very soon. I'm certain of that.
Sure, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yep.
So
Any
Scott,
go ahead, Danae.
So I'm really excited. This looks like it would be if this project can move forward, it's definitely going to help with Mesa's climate action plan. Have you looked like, and this may be the next step on the GHG side, but like how much closer it gets you to your goals, or how many other projects you would need to have in the pipeline to get there?
Yeah, I mean, we have looked at that, what we would need to get to net zero based on it. Well, if it was all supported by photovoltaics, and well, that is a tough question, because to hypothetically do that, to achieve our goal of 100% renewable energy, I mean, there's different ways that you could look at it. I think probably the easiest way would be to sum up what is the annual kWh of all sites, for, our city. And that includes, and that's not just sites either. We have, anything from buildings to water treatment plants to pumps to traffic signals. So anything under the sun, whatever kWh that is, all those, pieces of equipment or sites are consuming, that we have an array that produces the same kWh on an annual basis. But there's a lot of nuances to that, in a sense where there's going to be times where we're using more than what the system is producing, which obviously, would be like in the evenings or something like that. And there's going to be times where the system is vastly overproducing, what all the sites would need. So in that respect, and this is something I would like to see if the software or if System Advisor model has this sort of capability of looking at what would be the impacts of looking at something like the kWh for all sites, and then having a photovoltaic system, like if you're underproducing or overproducing. Well, I'm sorry, I digress. What would be the impacts of installing battery storage coupled with the photovoltaic system that you installed, so that when you're overproducing, you're able to store it, and then when you're underproducing, you're able to tap into that energy that you stored via battery storage. So because you would need to do that if we were going to achieve our 100% renewable energy goal. So for that matter, we have started to look at what would be a hypothetical array, and it just so happens that would be roughly a 45,000 kW system that would take up 200 acres. So to put it into context, if we want to achieve our goal, we need 200 acres of photovoltaic, which is a lot.
But that's good to know, as you're looking at opportunities. And I know that's one of the challenges that I keep confronting, especially, no offense, Brian, but in our SRP territories, kind of the practice that I've been told is size it to 75% of use. And that's because there isn't that net metering in play. And so we want to be careful not to lose money on it. And if we're only sizing to at most 75% of the usage, then we're never going to reach net zero. And so I think what you're talking about, kind of finding those innovative solutions with battery storage, potentially, coming to help play with that, that's really important.
Yeah, that's exactly what we were, looking to optimize is, those, different, utility structures that, do kind of put limitations on what would be the size of your system and how we can, correctly size it so that, we're not, necessarily costing the taxpayers dollars, with these systems that we install, aside from their actual, installation and initial cost. But we don't want them to be, I mean, granted, we're looking at, the economic paybacks, and, 12.3 isn't, a great payback, but obviously, when it comes to the climate action plan, and how this relates to that, we're looking at very much a triple bottom line here. So the economics come into, one component of it, but what plays into obviously the climate action plan is the environmental and social related impacts too of installing these systems. And it ultimately means better air quality, which, is, and obviously I don't have to get into it, but yeah, the we're using this, to help inform one aspect of, how we install photovoltaics. But yeah, there's all kinds of different motivations for while we're installing photovoltaics aside from just the economics.
Hey, Scott, this is Brian. Just a question about your financial model there. Obviously, we change rates. We just had a rate change November 1st, and then we do it again on May 1st. Does the model, I would assume, adjust and model for that, I would assume?
Yes, it does account for seasonal changes in the rate structures.
Got it.
That must be a pretty robust system if they're tracking all these different utilities and also their rate adjustments.
I mean, they must have a team for that. I mean, that's a job, because they've got to go through every utility's like PDF and individually put it in there. So.
Well, and I was kind of curious, Danae, because Danae, you're part of USDN, the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. And I was wondering if it might be an interesting ask of the organization to see which other municipalities may have used NREL's SAM modeling to see if they could provide some anecdotal, I guess, experience as to how well or how it mapped to maybe actual installation costs and outputs and inputs and everything.
Okay, I'm gonna pop it in the USDN Q&A form like right now. That's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, for those of you that might not be familiar with USDN, that stands for the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, which is a national network of cities and towns across the country that are involved in different aspects of sustainability and greenhouse gas emissions reduction and so forth. And so they have this nice national network and platform where they can ask different questions. And so it might be interesting, Scott, to get some input from others, as to how they may have used this and if the numbers jive, so to speak, if they actually used it to make decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Any other questions for Scott? No? All right. Well, I found that very interesting. And how old is this particular model? Do you know how long it's been available?
That I couldn't say. I'm on the webpage right now, and I don't know. Definitely for several years now.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not sure how long it's been around.
Well, I want to thank you for chatting with the group